Welcome. Andrew Nelson, and I'm going to talk about what I learned in Teach Now's Module 5 while developing a unit plan for 7th grade on the Enlightenment. And it was a great experience for me. I'm a complete novice at doing these types of things. And the whole process was laid out really well, taking it step by step. And, the first thing we did was develop objectives and SMART objectives. And we had learned a little bit about that earlier in Teach Now modules, but it was good to go over them again. And specifically this time, we were really learning how to write SMART objectives for a unit we were going to develop. And a lot of the ones that I originally wrote ended up in the last, but some had it in the final version. But a lot of them had to be de-emphasized, including this one, which I was really hoping students could spend more time on. But we're really, in the end, going to have to rely on students' prior learning of what they bring about people's mindset in the Middle Ages leading into the revolutionary change in thinking of the Enlightenment. That one's going to have to be de-emphasized in the final version of the unit. This one, the second one, ends up becoming like the whole primary thrust, learning about the social contract. This one here in the final version of the unit may have to get dropped as well. This one I give teachers the option of dropping because this, in California, the 7th grade, both the standards and the framework call for a unit on the Enlightenment to be taught at the end of the 7th grade school year, so that there may just not be time. And I was hoping originally that there would be more than a week, but it may be just a week that gets spent on this. And the ability to write these SMART objectives was greatly aided for me by unpacking standards and finding the action verbs in the standards. Though later in developing the unit, the standards became less and less important. Let me explain that in here. These standards here, these last three, are really deal with the Enlightenment: explain, describe, discuss. Those action verbs stay in my formative assessments, but some of the in the standards, like influential Enlightenment thinkers, Locke, Montesquieu, I realized that is going to have to be de-emphasized, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Magna Carta and stuff. For 7th grade, that's going to have to be de-emphasized to follow along with the I did get it in here. Let me just go back one more thing. Right here. This is right out of the frameworks. Okay, and the frameworks has the impact of ideas. And at this early point in the module, I didn't know exactly how specific I was going to have to get with all this other stuff. But as it was developed, there was this last question here: why were natural rights, the social contract, and other ideas of the Enlightenment revolutionary? That was going to become the focus of this unit. Just that one question there needed to be separated and taught as a unit itself, I felt. And in the frameworks, sorry if I already mentioned this. Again, this is the California frameworks here that can be downloaded online, and you can see they were adopted in 2016, whereas the standards were written in 1998. So when you get into the standards on page 230, you start with this impact of ideas, and here's, you know, the 4 driving questions, and here's the one on the Enlightenment specifically. And when you go all through this, you know, this unit is going to take a big chunk of time in, I mean, this whole section is going to take a big chunk of time. But when you get down to the question I was forming lessons for, it's just 2 paragraphs. Here's the question where it comes up again. Here's the question. And it says in these paragraphs right here that the teacher focuses on the social contract. Okay. And the other things that they want you to talk about are religious tolerance and equal rights under the law. You know, and that whole idea of diversity and minority rights and protecting minority rights ends up becoming a lesson plan on its own that wouldn't have been developed out of a reading of the standards. So it's the framework that drives that lesson. So you can see right after that, you go into 8th grade. So it's right at the end of the year, as I said. Now, some of the things that I learned from doing all this and writing out a formal unit and a formal plan and then reviewing it with colleagues was, if you go back to my original formative assessments, hopefully all these can stay in even like a mini lesson, like a half a class lesson while kids are working on the activity project. You do this to break up the class. But when I was sharing a what's not written here is any written formative assessments. And young gal, my classmate, after watching me teach a lesson, felt that I should have written assessments. So when I did develop a new lesson plan on titled "What About the Minority," that is one of the formative assessments I used based on her suggestion. Another suggestion I got, because I had another classmate watch my video, it was already prominently in my head that from actually teaching the lesson, this came up. And my other colleague, because I had 2 people, noticed it too, that while I was showing the class a video, I wasn't doing enough to keep them engaged. And I felt that if I had places where I was specifically going to pause the video and had developed those questions ahead, I think, you know, a more experienced teacher could probably rely on not having to be as prepared with that. But as a novice teacher going in, I'm going to have to be prepared on where I'm going to stop it. And so that was one thing that I learned just by doing it. Another thing that was good for me was actually reviewing the lessons that were written. And I felt like, you know, if this is up while you're in class and you're just reviewing it as you're going through, when you realize changes need to be made, just the idea of using these notes, I'd never actually, I know it seems silly, but I'd never actually used the Google Note thing. So much so that when I had to send it to my professor, I didn't know that I had to send it as an editing thing so she would see my notes. But that was just a great little tool to use. And you know, I think that overall as a novice, I would actually give myself a 4. Most of what I originally wanted to put into the original unit that I drafted ended up staying in there. I really only added 1 lesson after that, and it was a critical lesson, the one about what about the minority. I really only added 1 more formative assessment, and that was a written assessment that I think is important in a history class to have more writing than I originally planned for. It was great. It really made me excited to you know, as someone who's substitute taught for a while, like I know I have classroom experience in terms of classroom management, but a lot of being prepared and preparing my own lessons, and even having to prepare the stuff teachers give me in terms of substitute plans when you walk in, all of that stuff has been scaring me. And doing it through Teach now, learning how to actually do it, takes a lot of that burden off my shoulders, and it's given me more confidence that I can do what's going to be needed to be done to be an effective teacher, not just when I'm in front of students, but preparing so that I can be ready to be the best that I can be when I am in front of them. So thanks for listening, and that's my review of my unit, the Enlightenment.